Now let us just make this better and see what's wrong with it. Let's just go to the VS Code and change that class name. Just close this. We don't need this. We don't need this either. Auth, login, login as CSS. Need it. Flex. Let's just save it. Let it bundle. Now let's go back to Chrome and have a look. Yep. So now we can see the application page is being rendered properly here. Although there are a few problem in terms of like why it is not centering. So let's just fix that as well. Yep. So just need to put the display as flex, and then we will also put that in a row. Enter. So let's just copy this para styles. Copy this login section head. Go to the VS Code. VS Code. Now let's see if that change has worked. Yep. Is from the look and feel perspective, our application, our component looks much better, right? So now let us just create the template driven form. So far, now we have our login functionality working properly. So if you refresh this, it redirects us to the login page. When you log in only, then you're able to move to these things here. These two are fine. So now let's create the template driven form. Here in this tutorial, we are going to be building a proper template driven Angular form. So usually template driven forms are not first choice for me. Whenever I design any application, I always prefer reactive forms. However, template driven forms can also be used. As per Angular documentation, it is recommended to use template driven form only when the form is super simple. So in our case, simplest form that we were creating was the login form, wherein we just had two input and a login button. So let's quickly go to the VS Code and start working on creating a template driven form. So far we have created a login component and also the login component.ts. Let's just open them in parallel in a split screen like this. Now, whenever we need to design a template driven form, the first thing we need to do is to basically make a form. Firstly, we need to write the form element. So let's just make a form element here. Let's just copy entire thing from here to inside of form. Now we are going to be putting a name to this form. So this is a login form. And whenever you design a name like this, you will have to put a hash and the text determines the name of the form. So here, this is going to be of type ng form. I just write it like this. And as we had also seen that this form has basically two properties. Template driven forms are usually driven by an object model. So let's just create a model as well. The model name we are going to be keeping is login form model. Just make it of type any and design this. So the first is username. Let's just keep it empty. And then the password, make it empty as well. So this is the model that we're going to be using. So how do we use the model? We will have to basically make use of two-way binding in Angular, which is done through ng model. So is ng model is used to bind the data from template to component and component to template. So it is usually done by this. So ng model, and the name model is login fame form model dot username. But before that, we also need to provide the ID and name property to this form. Let's make it username. And ID is also going to be username. The same ID going to be used in email or put this here. Same way, we will have to define a model here. So let's just make it like this. ng model again for two-way data binding. And then let's just put name, which is login form model dot password. By this, whenever we submit the form object will have two properties, a login username and a login password. Both of these properties are mandatory. And whenever we need to define any validation on these forms, these are usually driven by the template. So you will have to define HTML5 required tag. The same tag needs to be given here in the password. Now we have defined form. The model name is also defined, and we have defined them required, right? And let's write down the name property also for name and ID property for password. Say, and just make it as name. Similarly, here the password label, we're going to be mapping it to password, right? Now we have done the basic coding required in the template. We have also created a model. We have also defined the validation. Now let's just put the condition here in the login button, and we want a login button to be disabled if the form is invalid. So how do we do that? Now the form name is login form, and then if it is valid, we don't want it to be disabled. Only when if it is invalid, this needs to be disabled. So we have defined the name, the ID tag for the input. We have also defined the label, the for tag, and also we have defined the function over here. So far so good. So let's just quickly go back to browser and have a look how our application behaves with this change. Where is the application? Let's just refresh it once again. Although white wheat refreshes it every time you make a change, but just for the sake. So right now we can see that it is valid, and then let's just remove this. Now you can see that the login button has turned disabled, which means it is invalid. Just to check if the properties are correctly bound or not, let's just make a code and let's just make some code change in the VS Code, and we are going to be writing something, let's say here, and we will make it as login form dot form valid. And although let's just put this right above the button, we're also able to see in the template. Let's just go to the Chrome browser. You can see initially that the form is valid. Let's just make some change in the code. Remove this, it has become false, which is invalid. So let's just write this down again. Remove the password field now. The moment we remove the password, it becomes false again, and this is disabled. Let's just put this again and log in. So dashboard page, students, back to dashboard. If we refresh, it moves us to the login page again. And let's go back to VS Code and remove the last line of code that we had committed to know if the PAM was valid or not. Let's just remove this, and now we are good to go. Now, if we need to send the form data to the server, we also need to capture this property at the TS file level. So how do we send this property to TS file level? That is also fairly simple. So all you need to do is whenever you click the login, let's just pass the login form detail, and let's put this as form, and here we can just console log this, which is form, remove everything from here. With that, we finished the template driven form, and now in the next tutorial we're going to be talking about reactive form, which are much more interesting and complex and fun to work with. Thanks for watching this.